Well, this retired couple dropped their bags at a Brunswick, Georgia Holiday Inn and they went out for a drive in the community. Now, his wife was wearing nearly $250,000 worth of jewelry, and suddenly, this retired couple from New York simply disappeared off the face of the earth. Was it a robbery gone bad? Maybe a homicide? Or an accident on a country road? What on earth happened to Charles and Catherine Romer? Well, hey folks, welcome to Profiling Evil in this special edition on another missing persons case. And I hope you're taking a moment, hitting the like and subscribe button and ringing the bell and doing all of that stuff. That way, you're going to receive notifications on our videos when we release them. And keep in mind, folks, this video, it was recorded a year ago, even more than a year ago, and it was edited back then. So we've got a few things that have gotten a lot better in that amount of time. So if there's some wonkiness with the audio or video, please cut us a little slack. Hey, I want to welcome my friend Taylor Nicholas of TGI Crime Day, and I hope you'll go over and visit her channel and subscribe. Thanks, Taylor, for joining me on this special episode, and I hope you'll just jump right in and tell us a little bit more about what we're going to talk about today.
42 years ago, Charles and Catherine Romer simply vanished. They were on a 1,300-mile road trip, which they detailed in a journal, and with family members almost daily. But their story suddenly came to a halt.
So, Taylor, this one was really intriguing to me because it's a couple. Tell us more about this case.
Charles and Catherine Romer were traveling from their winter home in Miami, Florida, back to Scarsdale, New York, in April of 1980. They had planned on taking 2 days to make the 1,300-mile trip and pulled into the Holiday Inn located in Brunswick, Georgia, for the night. After settling into their room, the couple jumped back into their custom two-door 1978 Lincoln Continental. This couple loved exploring each new area they came across, and that night seemed no different. Yet, it was dramatically different by the end. Now, many years later, it's pretty easy to say that something deadly must have happened because they never made it back to the hotel room. It would take several days before the hotel staff would contact police to tell them the couple hadn't used the room for days. That wouldn't happen, though, until they missed their checkout deadline on April 11th. When the hotel manager checked their room, he realized the couple never even used the room, leaving their luggage where they dropped it when they arrived. That's right, the luggage hadn't been moved, it hadn't been opened, and the bed hadn't been slept in. The only clue was Charles's journal entry, detailing that they had planned to be back in New York by April 10th, which was the day before the manager realized.
I just have to, I'm going to interject a question here, Taylor. I mean, you think about hotels today and with COVID, what's going on with COVID, we're back to this idea that hotels, unless you tell them to clean your room every day, they're not going to come and clean your room. And boy, this is a perfect reason. I'm the kind of guy that still makes and makes the request for them to come and clean. Some people think it's crazy, but, it just struck me. This is probably a really smart safety thing, too, if you're out alone traveling, to have that daily check. Now, whether hotels would do anything about it or not, if they didn't see that you were in there, I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that even if they didn't notice something right away, maybe the first day goes by and it looks like maybe you hadn't slept in the bed, then they wouldn't put up those red flags just yet. But if by the end of the trip they've gone in that room every day and they're starting to notice, hey, that stuff was there yesterday. Okay, it still doesn't look like they've been in there. And then that way at least the police would know at what point you had gone missing. Whereas if they had gone in and maybe they'd stayed one night, the room would look like it had been used. And then how would you know how many days they'd been there or not? Versus if someone comes and cleans your room every day, they're going to notice that you're not sleeping there. Unless you're like my husband and you just sleep and you don't move the entire night. No one would ever know.
Well, it would be really interesting, and we should get someone from the hotel industry on sometime. I know the newer hotels, the nicer hotels, I might say, have a system where they can electronically see everything that's going. Every time you pass your card in front of the door, there's more security cameras. But I wonder if they have any kind of protocol that says, hey, these people checked in, but they've never been here, especially when you can now check in with your mobile app and never even go to a front desk and leave them identification.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point too. When you check out now, they usually have like either a key drop or you just check out from your phone. So I guess that no one would notice, especially in this case where they went in to clean the room and then that's when they realized that nothing had been used, which I think would be very confusing for the staff.
Well, I've taken you down a hotel rabbit hole, but tell us more about this case.
So, in the weeks that followed, the local police and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation closely examined this case. Soon, the FBI and all of the resources that the federal government had were pulled into this case and the searches that were ongoing. However, Charles, Catherine, and the car they were driving were never found. As the decades have passed, three possible explanations remain. Number one, they were victims of a crime. Number two, they ran off and started a new life for themselves, which seems pretty unlikely. Or three, they had a terrible accident.
I'm with you. I mean, number one, I don't buy for a minute that this mature couple that seemed to have everything going for them would simply run off. I mean, they've already hit, it appears, the point in their life where they can do whatever they darn well want to do. So that makes me kind of want to add a fourth possibility, though. Do we know anything about their medical or mental health? Is there any possibility this could have been a joint suicide or a murder-suicide? I mean, I think this is quickly discounted as we look through the victimology, but what are your thoughts?
Definitely. I think that it's something that you can't really rule it out in any case. Like I feel like we've talked about before, you never know what's going on behind those closed doors, but I don't think that's very likely in this case, mainly because this couple had only been married for about 5 years at this time, which I love to think they were still like newlyweds, and they were retired. They had that summer home in Florida that they were able to go back and forth from. They'd made this drive before, and there had never been an issue, so it seems really weird to me that they would talk to Charles's son the day before and say that everything was going fine, that they had planned on being home on the 10th, and then suddenly something happened while they were on the road. That just doesn't seem very likely to me.
Yeah, and as we look into the victimology, this study of who the victims are, we see that Charles had recently retired from an executive level position at an oil company. I mean, he wasn't selling, burgers on the street corners. This guy had a pretty significant job. And according to all the media reports, he's kind of described as a Rockefeller personality. We uncovered that he was a really meticulous person. This isn't the kind of guy that's going to deviate from the itinerary that he and Catherine were operating under. Maybe at times even frustratingly to his companion. This is the schedule. We're 5 minutes late getting out the door. If we're going to make it by this point, we got to be here or there. And you probably know that. You can probably put a face to that personality type just as we speak. And it would appear to me that he was probably a little bit obsessive compulsive. And I hope family doesn't get me in trouble over that. I don't know this guy, but again, that personality type, oftentimes everything's just done by the book on an appropriate timeline. And this wasn't a new route to them either. I mean, this couple had made this trip before. And again, I think you just mentioned it, but the couple has only been married for about 5 years. The hotel that they're stopping at is right along the normal route, the same route that they take every single time. The stop's not out of the norm. What they're doing's not out of the norm. If, by all accounts, they drove directly from Miami, where they were last reported leaving, it's maybe, if they take their time, a 7-hour drive to that location. So they were probably tired of driving, but they certainly wouldn't be tired of getting out and looking around and exploring the country. So as I looked at it, Taylor, one of the possible explanations for their disappearance focused on whether they could have been potentially, if it's not suicide, victimized by a predator. Now, you uncovered some really interesting information about Mrs. Romer, and I think we ought to share that and then chat about the possibilities of whether this couple could have been robbed and murdered.
Yes, so at this time, Catherine was believed to be wearing between $60,000 and $80,000 of jewelry. I checked to see the comparison between 1980s money and today's money. That's the equivalent to about $275,000 in today's money.
Holy
It's $250,000 in jewels. I say, wearing my $12 necklace. I did think that that was really interesting. That was something that was mentioned a couple of times about Catherine, that she really loved to wear jewelry. And I love that that's a fact about her. And they were able to do that. Obviously, they had the money to be able to afford really nice jewelry. And if someone was looking specifically at them and was able to kind of clock that, is that something that someone maybe noticed and could have followed them out of a restaurant or at a gas station or wherever they might have been?
Wow, yeah. I mean, the robbery theory is really interesting. We could easily theorize they're driving around, and just like you said, somebody notices Mrs. Romer's jewelry. They become victims then of opportunity. But whenever I think about possibilities like that, I think about what's the real probability that they're glumping along the road and come across that one bad guy or group of bad guys that say, "Hey, let's rob them and take the risk in the middle of the day of something like this." I mean, for something like that to happen and them to permanently disappear, so many other things would have to happen at the same time. I mean, that perfect storm. So think about this. Let's say, with your thought of whether it could be a robbery, which again, I think is really powerful, we need to consider the predator or the predators would have likely met some resistance. Again, I don't think that Mr. Romer is any wallflower. He's kind of used to telling people how things are going to be. If he put up resistance, would it lead to a murder? Okay, let's say that it does. But if they murder one, then that leaves an immediate witness because the spouse is there. And so then I'm going to put you in that position. Now you're the robber, and you've killed one person, and your risk has just gone through the roof. What's your thoughts now? What are your choices?
Well, I mean, based on like scenarios that I've seen happen before and the way that this sometimes plays out, if it does escalate to that point, it's very uncommon for there to be any witnesses left. It's like you said, now you have created yet another crime. So not only a robbery, but a murder. And if one person witnesses it and one person is left alive, then they're going to know who did it and they're going to be able to identify and go to police immediately. So I'm kind of with you. I can see where my head is going with this. And the more you talk about it, the less and less likely it seems that it could have been a robbery, especially because on the area that they were in, it has multiple hotels. It looks like that's a pretty popular area for people to stop, maybe exactly in this situation on a road trip. So it's a well-populated area. You're right by the highway at that point. If you were going to maybe steal something from them, wouldn't you just jump in the car and hop on the highway and be off into the sunset rather than creating this whole back and forth thing where now there's witnesses and you have this, like you said, the perfect storm. It would have to be the exact right person or the exact wrong person, I guess, at the exact wrong time for them to have fallen victim to a robbery.
Yeah, there you go. So we start talking about probabilities versus possibilities. And certainly in their wacky minds, they could somehow justify another homicide. But then let's say that this is your murder case and you're investigating this and they did that. Then they've got two bodies they got to get rid of and a vehicle that they've got to get rid of. I mean, that's a ton of risk. And usually when something happens in opportunistic crimes, again, we're kind of theorizing they stumbled across them while they're driving because these aren't people that are normal to the community that somebody's watched over months and months. Then in these opportunistic crimes, we traditionally will see many more mistakes that would lead to discovery of this crime. Now, putting the two victims and pushing their car into a body of water and into a watery grave is a perfect way to get rid of the evidence. But I know, and I've personally worked with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. In fact, their former commander was a longtime friend of mine. And I think back to what Vernon might be saying right now, but I think they would have declared this was a crime, not a missing persons case, if they had anything to suggest that was such a notion, because that elevates everyone's attention too. You know, we kind of can get by with oh, they're not from around here and they disappeared, and people just kind of get it out of their mind. But you all of a sudden say we've had a murder in our backyard. That's something that people remember. So it brings us back to your theory, the third one that you talked about, which is it possible that this was an accident? I'd love to know your thoughts on that one.
In the articles that I read about this, it always was kind of talked about as the less mysterious theory. I think sometimes the idea of a jewel thief catching them off guard somewhere and stealing their jewels and taking their car, it's very glamorized. I don't think that it's nearly as mysterious as all of that. So I think the simplest theory is probably the most correct theory. The couple possibly just drove off the road into one of the many waterways in the area. And that's what we're going to talk about here in just a minute.
Folks, it's Mike from Profiling Evil, and I wanted to take a minute and tell you about our affiliate, Truth Finder. It's a company that I've been using for a couple of years to research cases and individuals. Now, Truth Finder uses publicly available information, but it brings it together in a way that provides answers quickly and concisely. You can use Truth Finder to check out your new babysitter, or maybe that new love in your life, or just to find somebody you haven't seen for an awfully long time. Truth Finder provides these comprehensive background reports, telephone reports, email reports, and even location information. So when you go in and examine the information in their search results, you're going to find personal information, contact information, and places where your target has lived, not only historically, but currently. Now, all this can seem really overwhelming and maybe a little invasive to you. So I want to make sure you understand all of the information is publicly available information. Truth Finder just has an algorithm that brings it all together in a way that makes it a whole lot easier to access. Now, Truth Finder is an affiliate, which means we get a tiny commission when you sign up. It's about enough to buy a Diet Dr. Pepper, frankly. But I want you to know that I use it every single day, and I hope that you'll take a moment and sign up with them. I've given you a discount code, and it's down in the link below, so make sure you grab it. EVIL10. And remember, you can cancel this thing at any time. Now, I hope you'll give them a try, but before you do, let's just jump back into today's discussion.
The Romers were last seen has multiple hotels right off of the freeway, like I mentioned. It looks like the perfect place to stop on a road trip, and this was actually not their first time staying at this hotel. They had stayed there before. Like we said, they'd made this drive many times before. The I-95 in this area passes over two different rivers, the East River and the South Brunswick River, and all of the investigators who have worked this case agree that the Romers and their car could have ended up in one of these big bodies of water.
You know, when we look at the geography in the area, we see that there are, in fact, a lot of different waterways that could simply swallow up a vehicle. Now, I'm theorizing a little here, but I can see this couple just going out for an evening drive along some of the back roads. And I don't know about you and your husband, but we like to just get off the big main roads and get out and see how people live in an area, kind of drive the back roads, look at some of the country farms, whatever you might find along there. It's where you really get a feeling for what's going on. And you mentioned I-95 a little earlier. Yeah, I like your thinking on this one because usually these interstates and many state roads have barriers that are designed to prevent vehicles from crashing over the side and going down into the river or a lake or whatever the canyon. I looked at some of the imagery in this area, and I confirmed that I-95 has barriers on it. So I think it's less likely that they went into water from I-95. Again, there's just too many barriers along the way. And as we look at some of these pictures, even approaching the bridge, it appears that there are barriers that would stop most vehicles. And I really appreciate some of the imagery here from Google Earth that it shows how far back even those barriers start before you ever get to parts of the bridge that are dangerous. Now, I think we're in the right area, though. I'd like to move, though, just a little bit to the east, if you don't mind, and think through the idea of that old Jackson Highway, for instance. Now, I think the area perhaps along the Turtle River is also really interesting. Now, I hope that we're getting the names right here because the map shows it as the Turtle River, but it also shows it as the East River, but I think it's the same river. Now, I've seen a couple of different names also for Jacksonville Highway, by the way. That old Jacksonville Highway is also called the Blythe Island Highway. So I'm sure somebody might write a letter to us and tell us where we were wrong on this, but everything on the map kind of points that this is the right area. But even on the Blythe Island Highway, the barricades are pretty darn big. Now, we got to remember, though, this was 1980, and we're looking at aerial imagery from Google, even going back. Some of it doesn't cover back as far as 1980. But it's interesting to me that I-95 was built back in 1957. So, I mean, this thing is old. It's been around. But the question becomes, were the barricades there back then? And were they to the level of security that they are today? But just take a second, look at this, Taylor, because I think it's really kind of cool. Just to the west of the old Jackson Highway is the Turtle River boat ramp, because the Turtle River flows into the confluence of the South Brunswick River. And this is why this is so important, and it's something that you uncovered that I think really changed my thinking on what could have happened. In 1986, a car seat, it was similar to the kind of car seats that are in a 1978 Lincoln Town Car, just like the Romer's car. A car seat floated up in the Fancy Bluff Creek area, about 2 miles southeast of that boat ramp that I'm talking about. The Fancy Bluff is just off the South Brunswick River, and the direction it flows could really tell us whether that East River and the South Brunswick or the Fancy are attractive for the team to consider. And I think it's because when those two come together, it creates a confluence where the water kind of spins and turbulates and moves around. Depending on which way that little Fancy Bluff River is flowing, it could account for how that car seat would get further up the river, down and into there. Now, if not, we have to look at 6 unique areas, including areas that are down just south of the Fancy Bluff. All of these are in an area where there used to be a really interesting thing you uncovered, an old drawbridge. I think you found that there had been some previous searches in that area also, didn't you?
So in that area, there had actually been multiple searches. There is a diver whose name is George Baker, who was involved in this case almost from the very beginning. So he had been involved with the searches for Charles and Catherine almost from the very beginning. As technology advanced over the years, he would continue to go out and keep these searches up and search for the couple and their car. The most recent search that I could find happened in 2010, actually, right in the South Brunswick River near where this bridge used to be. I saw in different places that there was a drawbridge that used to be there, and they've since taken it out and turned it into a boat ramp. And it looks almost like there's a different bridge that goes across this river that's maybe a little bit more stable. Baker and other volunteer divers have searched this area multiple times, but finally in 2010, they had a scanner that allowed them to see what was buried beneath the swift current and all of this thick mud. This is not a clear river like we've sometimes seen. Baker said that there were between 12 and 14 cars in this area, and one of them was actually a good match for the front end of a Lincoln Town Car, just like the one that they were driving. Unfortunately, due to the current in this area, these divers were never able to make that positive match. I found a really good quote from Baker that said, he said, quote, "We will have to wait until the technology evolves." George Baker and his fellow divers put a ton of time and energy into these searches, and he continued saying, "You know what drives this thing? 2 nice elderly people came to our county and they never left. Maybe the good Lord will allow me to find them before I get too old so they can have a nice burial."
What a good person. I mean, we reached out to George, who just happened to be, folks, under the influence of pain medications when we called. He just had back surgery, and we just couldn't get a whole lot of information from him, except for that he has dedicated so much time in trying to find them. Now, yeah, so what do we ask from viewers in cases like this? I mean, what's next?
Next is the cool part where you guys come in as viewers. So this is where you can help provide important information. If you know anything about this area or if you know anything about this case, you can call the Georgia State Police immediately and share that information. As much as we love to see your comments, please don't broadcast it through social media. Make sure that you get it to the right people who can do something with that information.
So there's the invitation, folks. We're asking you to share your theories. Just take a moment and put your comments down below in the comments section. And if you'll take time to put your comments below and then read over the comments being submitted by others, spend some time responding back and forth, it could really help us come up with some new ideas, maybe something that we're not thinking about. Remember, I talked about how important a fresh set of eyes are. Imagine the thousands of fresh sets of eyes that are going to be able to put information into the chat box below.
Yes, just to piggyback off of what you said, Mike, I think that including in the comments different facts about the area or different insights that you might have, as much as we can do through the internet, we can't stand in front of the rivers that are in that area and see what the possibilities could be. So if you're from that area and you're familiar with this highway or these waterways, we would love to hear about it. And any small tip, even if it feels insignificant, can be super helpful in the long run. So make sure you're talking to us and talking to each other and, doing that community aspect of it. Those little things actually do really make a difference. So make sure that you are leaving those comments and subscribing so you can keep up on everything.
Well, there you go, folks. What do you think happened to the roamers? I mean, how do they just disappear? Do you think it had something to do with the jewelry? Was it maybe just an accident? This one's going to be interesting. And I want to thank Taylor Nicholas of TGI Crime Day for joining me on this particular episode. We apologize to the Romer family for taking so long, but there were a few things happening in the last 12 months that we needed to have settled down before we released the video. I hope that you'll enter your thoughts on this case down below and let us know what you think happened in the case. Make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button, will you? Make sure you ring the bell and that you get all of our notifications on videos just like this one. And folks, please consider our channel memberships. And don't forget, if you like audio podcasts, you can check us out on your favorite podcast platform. You can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Now listen, we've got about 10 more missing person cases that were recorded a year ago. We're going to be releasing those over the coming weeks, and we hope that you enjoy them. Again, cut us a little slack on the audio, and thanks for supporting Profiling Evil. Hey, make sure you continue to check us out, and make sure you're checking out TGI Crime Day. I'm a subscriber. I hope you are too. And we'll see you all soon at the next crime scene.